Good morning, my friend. I'm Dr. Lee Warren, and I'm so grateful to be back with you for another episode of the Self Brain Surgery Podcast. And we have a doozy for you today. Angie Howell is a nurse who has an incredible story. She was already the mom of 7 children and wasn't intending to have another baby, but she did, as these things often happen. And it wasn't a good time for her. She was in the middle of the end of her 3rd marriage. She was struggling. They were struggling financially. They were struggling spiritually. They were struggling personally. But little baby Jade came along. And the story of what happened with the pregnancy, with Jade, some medical issues that she had, and what can only be described as a miraculous healing really needs to be told by Angie for you to believe it. She has a new book coming out. In fact, it's out by the time you hear this episode, Jewel of Heaven, and it is incredible. I've looked at the medical records myself. Angie shared them with me. I've seen the imaging. I've seen the records. And I can't explain this other than it being a miraculous healing of this incredible person who turned out to be Jade. So without further ado, we're going to talk to Angie Howell. And I want you to listen for some elements during this story. You know, Romans 8:28, as every bereaved parent, everybody who's lost a spouse, everybody who's been through something hard has heard somebody else say at the worst time, says God works all things together for good. And that verse doesn't feel very good when you hear it at those times. It turns out to be good later. But what I want you to hear in this story is that God did work Jade's story out for good. But that doesn't ever mean that everything gets easy, that it stops being messy, that it feels good at the time. So listen for places where God showed up when Angie felt he had abandoned her. Listen for places where science said one thing and faith said another thing. Listen for places where a friend or a family member praying and not giving up turned out to be the thing that made a difference for Angie and Jade and their whole family. This is an incredible story. It moved me to tears. I read the whole book in one day, 280 something pages I read in about 5 hours. I literally, when I say could not put it down, I did not put it down. I read the whole thing. And I'm so grateful that we have 3 copies of the book to give away. You listen for the instructions on that at the end. And please, when I tell you the email address that you need to write in, please don't use my personal email address if you have it. If you have the old email address that we've always used, make sure you send the email to the one I give you in the episode, or you won't be entered into the drawing because I probably won't see that request if you write in for a book. So make sure you listen to the instructions, follow them. Even if you already have my private email address, if you write into that one, you won't have a chance to win the book. And I want you to have a chance. This is an incredible book, Jewel of Heaven by Angie Howell. We had a wonderful talk. You're going to learn a lot from this story about faith and perseverance and never giving up and resilience and the power of praying for somebody you love and just lots of other moving parts of this unbelievable story. And it's one of those interviews where we don't veer off the story a whole lot. Angie just kind of leads us through the whole story. And that's by design because I can't improve on the narrative of how this story plays out. And I just want you to listen for places where your own story might feel really hard and it might feel really hopeless and it might feel really impossible. But don't forget, the Bible gives us instructions on what to do in those times. And Angie did them, and people around her did them. There's some wonderful characters in the story. There's some incredible moments of drama. And I hope you'll read the book, Jewel of Heaven by Angie Howell. Listen, let's get after it. Let's talk about a person who changed their life by changing their mind after a miraculous healing took place. And without further ado, let me give you Angie Howell. Let's get after it. Well, friend, we're back, and I'm so excited to introduce a new friend to you today. We've got Angie Howell coming to us from Nashville, and she has an incredible story and a new book coming out. We're going to get into it right now. Angie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here and just tell everyone about this amazing story.
Absolutely. It is an amazing story, and I'll shout out to our friends, our mutual friends, Pamela McClure and
Yes.
Jana Munsinger at MMPR. We share a PR agency for our books. And so shout out to them for connecting us. We're grateful to have you with us today, Angie. And let's just give the listener kind of a high-level overview of you and Jade and your story, and then we'll get into the weeds of this amazing, miraculous story that you're going to tell us today.
Absolutely. So back in the fall of 2006, I had 7 children and I was on the brink of divorce from my 3rd husband. And right at that time, I found out that I was pregnant with my 8th baby. And I wasn't happy about it at all because I was feeling a sense of freedom at that point. My youngest, Emmy, was about to turn 3. And I just felt like the gates had opened for me. I had been a mother for 18 years, and then this unexpected pregnancy hits me, and I just thought the world was ending at that
Yeah.
point. So I did the unthinkable, truly. I call it the unholy prayer. And I'm very much a pro-life person, always have been, but I didn't want to be pregnant. And so I asked God to remove the pregnancy from me.
Wow.
And I struggled for many years with that, with the shame and the guilt and everything that comes along with asking the Lord to do the unthinkable. I ended up having multiple hemorrhages then during this pregnancy. One was quite large, and I was absolutely certain that I had lost her because it was just an overwhelming loss of blood. And
Right.
she made it. She made it through all that my body was trying to do to her. So we go through this pregnancy, and I just knew something. I knew something wasn't right. In the DNA of who I was, I knew something wasn't right. I was older, which I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm 37. It's a harder pregnancy. Everyone tried to reassure me that everything was going to be okay, but I just knew it wasn't.
Right.
And I really wasn't walking with Jesus. I was this lukewarm Christian who had accepted Christ as my savior as a child, but really wasn't in that walk and obviously following. That's the reason why I was 37 years old and on the brink of my third divorce.
Yeah.
And so when she was born, she came out and she seemed okay and had this sweet little cry, and everyone said, "Look, we told you, she's fine."
Yeah.
And I just sort of let my guard down for a minute. I went from that horrible place of worry and not knowing to, well, here she is. She looks beautiful and she's perfect.
Yeah.
So we go home after a few days, and by the way, I'm a pediatric nurse. So my
Yeah.
life was working with newborns. I was also an international board certified lactation consultant. So I could get any baby to breastfeed,
Yeah.
any baby. They would bring them to me, but I could not get Jade to breastfeed. I could not get her to eat. I couldn't even get her to take a bottle. And so these days are just flowing, it seemed like forever, but by the time I reached her 5th day of life at home, I looked down on this table in front of my living room couch, and there was a breast pump and a finger feeder and a cup feeder and a Haberman and all of these devices that I would use to get a baby to nurse. And I just realized Jade isn't lazy. She's dying. And
Yeah.
as a pediatric nurse, I should have caught that, right? I should have known like something is wrong. And I didn't. I was exhausted and I didn't want to go back to that dark place. I didn't
Right.
want to admit something was wrong.
And so you have the baby after a difficult pregnancy, and then she's not eating. And even though it's within your own specialty, that had to be an incredible challenge because medical people, we sort of know too much, don't we? Like you
Right.
knew, even though everybody said it was okay, you recognized that she was dying. And what happened then?
Yes. So as soon as I had that moment of realization that something was very wrong, I called the pediatrician at the hospital. I immediately got the doctor on the phone and I said, "Look, I have seven other children. I'm a pediatric nurse. Like, I know what I'm doing, and something is wrong with her. Her temperature was very low. I think it was like
Yeah.
95 or something at that point. She was just very lethargic. The milk would just run out of her mouth. And I said, "Look, we need to be admitted right now." So they direct admitted her, which is pretty uncommon to just direct admit based on a parent report.
Right.
And so we went straight into the PICU, and that was really the beginning of what our life would be like for many years at that point. Did a lumbar puncture. They thought maybe it was meningitis. As soon as we got there, her tone was so low. Her head was very floppy. There was just no tone at all. And really, she looked dead. Her face was just ashen. And so immediately there was a team waiting for her, and they put her in the PICU. And then, as you know how it goes in the
Yeah.
hospital, boy, everything just started moving. There were IVs and there was oxygen and there were blood tests, and they checked PKU, they checked for Down syndrome. everything that they could think of at that moment, in addition to the lumbar puncture for meningitis. And then she improved with the fluids, but she didn't improve with eating.
Right.
They dropped an NG tube, and which is a tube that goes through the nose into the stomach. And that's how I fed her for about a month before she got her permanent G tube in her stomach.
Now you had multiple other children, 7 other children at the time in a struggling marriage. Like, what was your life like, and what was your marriage and your family like during this time when your child was so sick? 'Cause I've seen that a million times where the sick child requires so much attention from
Yes.
mom or dad or mom and dad that it puts a real strain on the rest of the family. Like, what was that like?
Yes. In that time, my focus was on Jade. And looking back, there's a lot of, I have not anymore, but I had a lot of guilt because my kids lost me. My
Right.
other children lost me. My focus was on just keeping her alive. And to Jade's dad's credit, he really had to step in and be both mom and dad for all the children, the children who were at home, some of which weren't even his biologically. And so he really had to just pull everything together because I was literally dying in what I called my dungeon. It was just a room, an office where I took care of Jade, all of her extraordinary medical needs. And the kids just sort of lost their mom for a while. And Jade's dad lost his wife for a while.
Now, what was that experience of being sort of isolated in that dungeon when you knew something was wrong? What did that do to your faith, or what was your faith like during
Yeah.
that time?
I was very angry. I was already, like I said, just a lukewarm Christian, just really trying to figure out where Jesus was. Why had he left me? Why was I having to go through all of that? And she was the innocent one. She'd done nothing wrong, but I felt like she was paying for all of my sins. And I was just so angry that I could not even grasp that Jesus was anywhere near me. I felt so alone. I had lost all faith, and I was very angry at God, very angry.
And I mean, I can relate to that as a father who lost a son.
Yes,
There's these moments when you don't want to relate to a kind God because he doesn't feel kind to you. He doesn't feel close to you.
right.
You feel like he's putting his thumb on the scale, and it just doesn't feel fair. And at some point, you decided, or the doctors decided, that Jade needed a brain MRI at some point,
Yes.
imaging, because you had a CT. You knew she didn't have hydrocephalus or some of the other things that I would have been involved in. You decided to get an MRI, and you described that scene when you took your baby to the waiting room to get the MRI, and you're dealing with a lot
Whew.
of other parents with disabled children. And what was that like for you emotionally?
That was a tough one. There were so many things that happened during that visit for me personally that I really had to look at who I was as a human being.
Yeah.
Showed up in the hospital at the time was in the process of building a brand new hospital. So we kind of got the tail end of a more than 100-year-old hospital.
Yeah.
And we walked in, and I just remember seeing all these children in wheelchairs, and I thought, why are we here? Why are we here with all of these kids who have disabilities? And then it hit me that they think that Jade is going to have something drastically wrong as well.
Right.
And I remember the moment where I just couldn't hold it back anymore. And I left the room, went to the bathroom, and I threw up. I threw up in the sink, and I just sort of hung there, knowing that this is where we're going. This is what's going to happen. And
Right.
it was frightening.
And you knew something was going to be wrong with that scan at that point
I
in your
did.
heart.
I did. I knew in my heart, just because why else would we be here? And I really, like I said, I really had to, at the end of this, look at who I was, because in my mind, I just kept saying, she's not like them. She's not like them. And
Right.
I call it the creosote on my soul. I mean, creosote is the black stuff inside of a chimney. And when there's too much of it, and it can catch on fire, and it can burn you
Yeah.
down. It can burn the house down. And that's where I was at in my life. I had so much creosote on the inside of my soul that I was a fraction of an inch away from just burning to the ground from who I was then.
That's going to relate. A lot of listeners are going to relate to that moment because you get to this place and time where you don't feel like you can take any more pressure and you don't feel like you
Right.
can take any more bad news. And yet
Right.
it's coming because you know that MRI result is coming. So describe that day when you went and met with the neurologist and you had to
Yes.
look at those scans and
Yes.
set that up for us, what that was like.
Wow. So we got back home fairly quickly after the brain MRI, the first one, and my phone rang. And it was Dr. C, our neurologist, and he just said, I need you to come back. I have the results and I want to show you. It's easier for me just to show you. And I said, that's fine. We'll be back tomorrow, but I need you to tell me what's going on.
Right.
And he just said, well, Jade has absent myelination of the white matter of her brain, which I know is a big sentence, but
Yeah.
I also knew it was not good. And I think that was the moment when I realized everything about our lives had just changed. There was no coming back from that.
Right.
That's not something that just fixes itself, right? So we show up at the neurologist office and Jade had a number of things that were going on, but he put up two screens. And on one screen was it was this beautiful, bright brain, and I could see it was just full of life. I mean, anyone looking at it could tell that it was perfect and normal. And he said, I'm going to show you Jade's brain now. And he brought up the other screen, and it was just, there wasn't any, I mean, it was just dark and there wasn't anything there. And you could just tell just such a stark difference between the two. And it was pretty overwhelming to see, I mean, if you have a child who has a cleft lip or a club foot, those are very easily correctable. They're not fun for any family to deal with, but they're easily correctable. And you don't get a brain transplant, right? You don't
That's right.
you get what you get.
That's right. Well, and just so the listener understands, so myelin is a chemical that's produced in the brain and the peripheral nervous system that coats the outside of nerves and basically makes it possible for nerves to transmit their impulses efficiently. And in the brain, when you have disorders that affect how myelin is formed, you get diseases like multiple sclerosis or sometimes other congenital anomalies in children. And so this was a devastating thing to hear and see, like the idea that your child's brain doesn't have myelin means that brain is not going to be able to communicate with the spinal cord and peripheral nerves, and that child's not going to be okay. So that's going to turn out to be most of the time a fatal kind of diagnosis.
Right. And I knew that while this absent myelination was a symptom of something else. And so at that point, we get set on this path of
Right.
many, 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 many things. I bet 30, maybe 40 different diseases or congenital disorders that she was tested for. And many of these were send outs. So they went to like Mayo or they
Right.
went to Europe. There was one or two that actually had to go to Europe. And so we were 6 to 8 months waiting. And none of them were good. And so
No.
we just were sort of sent home with, and Dr. C, I just have to give this man, he was the most compassionate, kind, amazing human being that we worked with in this whole process. And we worked with many specialists, metabolics, genetics, neurology, GI, rehab. There were so many, and everyone has a purpose. They're there to help you find out what's wrong with your
Right.
child. But Dr. C was just the most amazing. I'm still in touch with him, actually. We talk once a month or so now. He's retired.
Wow.
So we just went home knowing that we didn't know how much time we would have with her. But he wanted a follow-up brain MRI. So at that point, we knew we would be coming back at some point in the next few months just to kind of get that benchmark of how much worse is it, because we didn't know from there.
Cousin who was I can read just in the page, I can see this guy.
Yes.
I have a cousin that reminds me of him. A cousin who's a different kind of character on the outside than you. And tell us the story of your cousin Rich and who he is and the first encounter that we see of him in your story and how it ended, because it was quite surprising how you kind of hit one of those boiling points with him, but he didn't just go away. So tell that story.
Ah, praise God for cousin Rich. So cousin Rich
Amen.
is 1 year older than me. So we really grew up more like brother and sister.
Yeah.
We had kind of gone different ways as adults. Rich got in trouble a lot as a teenager, and he just had a really rough life for a while. And I
Right.
went the other direction and became the cheerleader, and we just at that point sort of diverged in our lives. And but Rich, a few years before all of this happened with Jade, he had found Jesus. Jesus had found him, and
Yeah.
he had become just on fire. He was at this place in his life, and he carried his Bible with him everywhere he went. He was a Harley rider. I called them the Christian biker gang in my
Yeah.
book, because they're just this. He was in a group of men and women who followed Jesus, and they did good things for the homeless. So Rich shows up at the first hospital stay when Jade was maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks old. At this point, we're still in the hospital.
Right.
And I am just exhausted at this point. I'm up every 2 hours pumping for her. I'm doing these NG tube feedings, worried sick about her. I haven't left the room in 2.5 weeks, and Rich shows up. And I was just not having it. I just wanted a shower that day. I just wanted a shower, and he had shown up, and he just wanted to talk about Jesus. He just wanted to be there. And he's very persistent, and which is amazing. And I'm so grateful for that now. But I was just angry with him. I was angry, and he started reading the Bible. And I just said, look, just stop. Jesus is not here. God has left me.
Mm.
I am paying for my sins, and you just need to take your Bible and get out of here.
Wow.
And I ordered him out, and he left. Just such a shameful moment. Again, like, this is what the story's about, is so much shame and brokenness, and all these people that God just kept just sending my way, like, here's someone else for you, Angie. Here's someone
Right.
else. And I just kept pushing that away.
Wow. And you pushed Rich away, and you had some encounters in the hospital with some doctors that embarrassed me as a healthcare professional, bad bedside manner and careless thoughtlessness, and you dealt with all of that. So you're at the end of your rope. You're about to explode on everybody. You do explode on Rich and one unfortunate resident physician.
Yes, I
It's a great.
did.
I don't want to tell all those stories because the book reads
Okay.
like the beautiful novel. Like I can't believe it's your first book, by the way. Your writing is so good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Outstanding. It took me 4 books to learn how to write that well. So nice job.
Thank you.
But so you kick Rich out. You finally get home. Jade's had a feeding tube placed. She's still not doing well. Then Rich comes back and says, "Hey, we need to get together." Like, so you finally consent to meeting with him.
Yes.
A
Yes.
bunch
Yeah.
of chain smoking, Bible banging, Harley bike riding types. It's an amazing story.
It is. So it's a hot August day in Colorado, and we have dry, like 100-degree days there in August. And it had been rough. Jade had been sick, and I just remember, I had been thrown up on I don't know how many times. But Rich had been trying to call me,
Right.
and I just ignored his calls like I did everyone's. I just didn't. I was, again, extremely angry at this point. He just kept trying to call me. Well, he called me, like, I think it was from like an unknown or a blocked number or something. And I answered it by chance, thank you, Jesus. And he just said, oh, so I have to block my number now, or whatever, to get a hold of my own cousin.
Yep.
So he talks me, and finally I just conceded, but he talked me into taking Jade to be prayed for with the Eternal Brothers ministry. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't. I didn't want to go there. I think I was afraid of being around other people, but also,
Right.
these guys were, they had tattoos. Some of them had them on their necks. And
Right.
here was Angie, again, this creosote in my soul. Somehow I was better than, somehow they had nothing to offer me. But I did it. And so we show up, and there's all these Harleys, and they're lined up out front, and people in their leather. But what I remember most about the day as I took Jade in is I felt like I was in this bullseye of
Yeah.
holding Jade with all these people around us. And I didn't know what was happening. I remember thinking, I've never had this many people praying, but for this long. And then
Right.
all of a sudden, the hands come out and they start touching her. And as a nurse and this very
Yeah.
protective mama, I'm like, they just smoke cigarettes. And now
Right.
they're touching her face. And then someone breaks out the anointing oil and it's going on her forehead and her chest and her abdomen. Every place that there was something wrong with Jade, they were touching and
Right.
they were laying hands on her. And I was just in this middle of this bullseye, and I'm like, how do I get out of here? Where's the door?
Right.
They finish the prayer, and I gather up Jade, and I exited as quick as I could. And Rich follows me out, and I was mad again. I was like, this is on you. If she gets sick, like, I can't believe you and your friends would put their filthy hands on my baby. And I get in the car. And then I realize I'm different. Something's changed. Something's changed in me. Something's changed in her. I don't know
Right.
what it is. I can't explain it, but there is something that has changed.
You describe it. I mean, in your own attitude, in your own spirit, you begin feeling more sensitive, more
Yes.
connected to God, more connected to your family, more appreciative and grateful. You start seeing moments in the midst of the pain where you're feeling gratitude and joy almost at different ways. You're starting to see her as a person, not just a sick person.
Right.
And I think that's a huge thing that all of us who deal with chronic illness or pain, we start
Mm,
seeing the problem and not the person. And
yes.
all of a sudden, you started seeing Jade as this human being who wasn't sick and dying, but was your daughter who
Right.
was, had a future. And by the way, we didn't talk about your choice of naming her Jade and what that turned out to mean.
Wow, what another powerful just part of this story. So I chose the name Jade when I was pregnant with her. We found out it was a girl and I just love the name. There was nothing behind it. And then I find out after all of this, two things. One, Jade means jewel of heaven, which is the name of my book, Jewel
Right.
of Heaven. The other thing that is just so amazing and truly representative of what God had planned for all of us was Jade's so how Jade is a gemstone, right?
Right.
And Jade is formed. Jade the gemstone is formed by massive heat, tectonic plate movement, extremely high pressure. Well,
Yeah.
think about everything that we went through. It was all of those things. It's a metamorphic rock. And as I look back and I go, that's exactly what happened to us. Extreme heat,
Right.
tectonic plate movement, high pressure. And look at where I've come, where I was and where I've come. I was transformed too.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how God just writes these stories.
It is. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So you're having this heart change, right? The men and women all lay hands on Jade and you and pray, and it doesn't miraculously fix your life. Your marriage doesn't get miraculously better. Jade doesn't start miraculously eating better. Nothing miraculous happens except inside
Right.
you at the time.
Right.
But then it's time for that next MRI. Like, catch us up
Right.
with that. It's time for the next MRI. You get back to the doctor's office. He shows
Yes.
you the screen
Yeah. A
again.
few weeks later, it really was only a few weeks after the brothers and the sisters laid their hands on her, and it was a scheduled brain MRI because she wasn't getting better. She was eating absolutely nothing. Now she's at first had some taste, but now she's doing nothing. And
Right.
so we really went back to find out if we would get sort of like what how many months do we have with her? How much worse does
Right.
her brain look? And so we showed up and everyone's just ironically like happy when I get to the doctor's
Yeah.
office. And we were both, Jade's dad and I, Todd, we were both just like, this is weird. Why are they acting so
Yeah.
happy? So we go back in, it's the same thing. I'm expecting, we sit down in the same place and Dr. C comes in and he says, well, I think I'll show you. I'll just show you. And so he lights up that left screen again. And again, I'm just jealous because it's this beautiful, beautiful brain. And I'm waiting for the other screen to pop up so we can see how the difference and how much worse it is. And it doesn't pop on. And Dr. C says to me, I can't explain it, but this is your baby's brain.
Wow.
And it was perfect. He said, her brain is completely normal.
Wow.
I have no explanation for it, especially in such a short amount of time, such a profound change. The syrinx that she had is gone.
Yeah.
Everything in her brain, it is completely normal. It was amazing. And I knew at that moment that there had been a miracle. There was
Yeah.
absolutely no explanation. I have spoken, I mean, now I've got a neurosurgeon in front of me who can also talk about this, but I've spoken with 4 different neurologists. Every single one of them says, I can't explain it. There's no explanation.
That's right. And I've seen the images, friend. I'm telling you, this was a significantly abnormal brain. And not just that, but as you mentioned, there's a syrinx, which is a fluid collection in the spinal cord. And there was a significant syrinx, and it's gone. I mean, the second MRI is normal. It just looks completely normal. Interestingly, so you get this prayer happens, and then the scan changes. And I think most 21st century Christians hear that story and we're cynical about it. And I was talking to my
Yes.
wife, Lisa, a few minutes ago, and I said, that's exactly what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to, James 5 says, we're supposed to lay hands, anoint,
Yes.
pray, believe, offer a prayer in faith, and God will heal. And so you're giving an example of an answer to a biblical call and obedience
Absolutely.
to that. And it's amazing.
Yes. And look at who God used. He used these cigarette smoking, daily writing, leather wearing bikers
Yeah.
to do his work, not unlike stinky fishermen and tax collectors.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
mean, and that's one of the best parts of the story is that God uses the most unlikely people to perform the most extraordinary miracles,
As he always has.
as he always has. So it's just, again, it's amazing because here we have the broken, we have the misfits, we have the faithless, we have all of the components of a biblical story that happened in 2007. And so I mean, I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for God sending these people who I discounted, who
Right.
I was going to have nothing to do with. And it just shows us that God weaves his stories into people that we would not expect, including the woman at the well, which is who I was. And
Wow.
I have the transformation, not just in Jade's brain. That's a massive transformation,
Yeah.
but the miracle that happened in me as well, because I'm telling you right now, I am on fire for Jesus. It's not going away. And I'm just such a different human being than I was back then.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And I don't want to give away the whole story because you need to read this book, friend. But there's one more story I want you to tell, and maybe just first before we get to the conversation you had with Jade about heaven once you started talking, because that's the emotional, I think, highlight of the book for me. But get us to where she is now. Like, just give us a kind of a quick um, timeline of
Yes.
that MRI. She doesn't immediately get better, but over time she does. And tell us what's happening with Jade now before we land
Yes.
on that story.
So Jade was never supposed to walk, shoot, or eat, or talk, or anything. And that journey was very long for us. She didn't do things as soon as my other children did, but she did start doing. She walks, she talks, she eats. She's absolutely an incredible, beautiful, inside and out human being. Now Jade does have some cognitive difficulties. So her IQ is low, which we would be able to compare, say, to an individual who has Down syndrome. So she has some reasoning issues, and we've sort of struggled throughout the years with that. But I wouldn't change anything about her. She is perfectly imperfect. And I wish more families, when we get these diagnoses and we get these diagnoses, that we would look at where is the beauty, where can we find beauty in this situation, even if there's not a miracle, even if things don't go the way that we plan or that we want. Every
Right.
child with a disability, there's beauty to be found. And what can we do with that in order to glorify God? So Jade's going to be 18 in, gosh, 9 days. She will be 18 on Easter Sunday, which is the craziest thing too, because she is going to be an adult. She's going to turn 18 on Resurrection Sunday.
Amen.
And this happened. So Easter on April 20th, I think it happens twice in a century. And by chance, this girl who was never supposed to live becomes an adult on Resurrection Sunday.
That's a miracle right in itself. This whole story of you and your daughter and your family, it's just beautiful, and the writing is so good. And I just highly encourage you, friend, if you want to read a real story that's got pain and heartache and messiness and doesn't end with everything wrapped up in a bow like a fiction sometimes does, but it does show God's constant presence and faithfulness and
Yes.
in the lives of real people, and it's just amazing. But there's one more story, and you talk about Jade, meaning jewel of heaven.
Mm.
When she begins to be able to talk, she tells you a story as a toddler that can't be fiction. So tell us that, we're going to get kind of land this plane here.
Yeah. So I get goosebumps every time I think about it. So Jade was 7, but at the age of 7, she was still really cognitively around the age of 3 or 4.
Right.
And it was the end of the day, and she and I were just reading a book. We were going to read this book about dancing in heaven, I think is what it was. And I want to go back to these hemorrhages. So the big one we talked about in the beginning, there was this hemorrhage I had. There was no way I thought this baby was going to make it through this massive hemorrhage. And then she did. She survived this hemorrhage. But I was laying on the bathroom floor in blood, and I'm crying out to God, please just save my baby. I just want to raise my baby. And so that fast forward to when Jade is 7 years old, and she's laying with me in bed. We're getting ready to read this chapter about heaven, and she gets very excited, and she starts sort of looking up and pointing, and she says to me, "Oh, mommy, I know heaven." And I just thought, oh, this is so cute. She's just so sweet. And I said, okay, JD, what do you know about heaven? And she said, that's where I met Jesus. I thought, boy, she's getting really good at making up stories, and I said, well, tell me about that, JD. How did you meet Jesus? And she said, Mommy, I met Jesus in heaven when he was making me. And and she said, I asked Jesus, where's my mommy? I want my mommy. And she said, he put me back in your tummy.
Wow.
And I thought the book would be more about this miracle and this experience with Jesus. But as I wrote it, so many more things came out. So many more of the stories came out. But there's no way. She didn't know I had hemorrhaged. She didn't know how to create a story like that. She was talking baby talk at 7. And so just an amazing story of how she met Jesus in
And it's
heaven.
amazing in the medical sense. I mean, you had a diagnosis from an ultrasound of your uterus and placenta having hemorrhage, and there was a real almost certainty that you were going to miscarry her. And you described that event that night when you were bleeding, and then she ties it back 7 years later with basically having a conversation with Jesus about going back there. And it's
Yes.
just amazing. And the way you wrote it's just so real. Again, my wife Lisa and I had a conversation about that this morning. That's exactly the kind of thing that Christians are supposed to believe. And
Right.
yet we challenge that's such a crazy story. Like that we're so cynical nowadays.
Yes.
But you've broken through my cynicism as a 25-year practicing board certified brain surgeon. And I've seen the pictures myself, and you've got a miraculous story on your hands. And Angie, I just, like I said, I don't want to give the whole story away, but there's so much in your book, the time when you contemplated suicide.
Yes.
There's struggles with your family. It's messy. It doesn't end with the bow wrapped around it with your marriage
Right.
and everything else. And I just want to congratulate you. I'm being brave enough to tell the story, and thank you. You inspired me today.
Thank you so much. I am so grateful for the story that God created. And yes, it's messy. It's messy, messy. And I'm glad it is, because how many people out there are walking around in their own mess. And I just want people to know that Jesus is calling for you. Come to him. Let him be a part of the mess, because he's going to meet you right where you are.
Amen. Where can people find out more about you?
Yes, so you can find more about me and this book at angiehowell.com. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I just recommend get one and then just give it to people. hand it out to your friends, loan it out. It's all about getting the story out there and helping people find Jesus.
Amen. And the good news is we have 3 copies of the book to give away.
Yes.
So if you're listening and you would like to have a chance to win one of Angie's books, send me an email, contact@drleewarren.com, contact@drleewarren.com. We need your name, your mailing address, and your zip code. And it's got to be a U.S. address. No P.O. boxes, but contact@drleewarren.com. We're going to give away 3 copies of this amazing book, Jewel of Heaven. Angie Howell, we are praying for you and the impact of your story around the world. God bless you. Thank you for your time today, friend.
Thank you so much.
What an incredible conversation. I hope you enjoyed that. I can't encourage you highly enough to read the book, Jewel of Heaven by Angie Howell. I'll put her website and all the links in the show notes. Listen, if you enjoy this show, please take a second to leave a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. That really helps other people find the show. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Go out to YouTube. Search for Dr. Lee Warren. You can follow us on YouTube and watch the videos there. Lauren, our assistant, is helping us get them all on YouTube, and all the new episodes going forward hopefully will show up on YouTube there. So if you prefer to watch instead of listen, you can do it on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe there as well. And listen, every Sunday since 2014, I've given you my best prescription for changing your mind and changing your life using self-brain surgery and smashing neuroscience and faith together. All you need to do to get that is go to drleewarren.substack.com and sign up for my newsletter. It's free. You can get it every Sunday, and it'll really help you. Please, please, if you're not getting the newsletter, make sure you get it. That's how you're going to find out about special events like the School of Self-Brain Surgery coming, about special deals on the book launch that'll be coming in a few months. It's how you find out about everything, and it's how every Sunday you can get the encouragement you need to change your mind and change your life and smash neuroscience and faith together to overcome hardship, trauma, tragedy, and other massive things. That's how we get it done. Starts at the newsletter. So the podcast is only part of what we're working hard to bring you every week. And go sign up for the newsletter, drleewarren.substack.com. Listen, friend, you can't change your life until you change your mind. I hope Angie Howell's story will help you get that done. Go check out the book, Jewel of Heaven. If you don't get one of the 3 free copies, please consider buying one, borrowing it from the library, or reading the book. Make sure you get to know Angie's story and check out her website. Links in the show notes. We'll see you next time for some more self-brain surgery. I'm Dr. Lee Warren. God bless you, my friend. Have a great day.